My parents canceled my 18th birthday party because my older brother, Christopher, felt overshadowed by my milestone. They told me to be understanding, but I packed my bags instead. 1 year later, my success triggered a meltdown that exposed their golden child as a fraud. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence in the kitchen was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that hangs in the air before a storm breaks. I stood in the doorway, my hand still resting on the cool metal of the doorknob, staring at the empty table. It was May 12th, my 18th birthday. For months, my mother, Valentina, had promised me a dinner. Just a dinner. Nothing extravagant, no grand hall or DJ, just a meal with family and perhaps a cake that wasn't bought from the clearance rack at the gas station. We had discussed it in detail. I wanted lasagna, her special recipe, and a vanilla cake with strawberries. I had spent the last week daydreaming about it, using the thought of that warm, cheesy pasta to get me through my final exams. But as I walked into the kitchen at 5:00 p.m., expecting to smell simmering tomato sauce and garlic, I smelled nothing. The air was stale, smelling faintly of the burnt toast Christopher had likely made at noon. The counters were bare. The stove was cold. Sitting at the table were my parents, Roman and Valentina. They were drinking coffee, their faces etched with a grim seriousness that usually accompanied a funeral announcement or a tax audit. "Mom, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I dropped my backpack on the floor, the heavy thud echoing in the quiet room. Is everything okay?" Valentina looked up, her eyes rimmed with red, as if she had been crying. Roman just stared into his mug, refusing to meet my gaze. "Gabriella," my mother started, her voice a hushed whisper. "Please keep your voice down." My stomach dropped. "What happened? Is it Grandma?" No, Roman said, finally looking up. He looked exhausted, burdened by the weight of the world. "It's Christopher." I froze, of course. It was always Christopher. My older brother, 22 years old, perfectly healthy, and yet somehow the most fragile creature on God's green earth. "What did he do this time?" I asked, the concern instantly evaporating, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. "Did he crash the car again? Did he lose his phone?" "He's in a very dark place, Gabriella," Valentina said, her tone sharp, warning me to tread carefully. "He's been in his room all day. He realized that today is your birthday." I blinked, confused. "Yes, it is. That's usually how calendars work." "Don't be sarcastic," Roman snapped. "Your brother is going through a crisis. He feels stagnant. He told us this morning that seeing you turn 18, becoming an adult, makes him feel like a failure. He feels like time is passing him by while he's still finding himself. He's very sensitive right now." I waited for the punchline. I waited for them to say, "So we need to be extra nice to him during your party." "Okay," I said slowly. "So, is he coming down for dinner, or should we just save him a plate?" Valentina took a deep breath, reaching across the table to touch Roman's hand for support. "Gabriella, honey, we can't have the dinner." The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. "What?" "We can't celebrate tonight," she said, her voice gaining a little more strength now that the Band-Aid was ripped off. "Christopher is devastated. If we make a big fuss about you, cooking a special meal, lighting candles, singing, it's just going to rub salt in his wounds. It would be cruel to flaunt your milestone when he's feeling so low." I stared at her. I looked at my father, who nodded in solemn agreement. "So," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "because Christopher is jealous that I'm growing up, I don't get a birthday." "It's not jealousy," Roman corrected me, his voice stern. "It's depression. It's existential dread. You wouldn't understand, you've always had things come easily to you. We just need to keep the house quiet tonight. We ordered pizza. We can eat it in the living room and watch a movie he likes, just to cheer him up. Pizza, I repeated, and a movie he likes on my birthday. It's just a day, Gabriella, Valentina said, waving her hand dismissively. You're an adult now. Part of being an adult is making sacrifices for family. We can do something for you later. Maybe next month, when Christopher is feeling more stable. I looked at the empty stove. I looked at T. He, two people who had brought me into this world, who were currently looking at me not with love, but with annoyance that I was making this difficult for them. Something inside me, a thin, taut wire that had been stretching for 18 years, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet, final, and irreversible. I see, I said. My voice was calm, unnervingly calm. You're right, I am an adult now. Good, Roman sighed, relieved. I knew you'd understand. Go wash up. The pizza will be here in 20 minutes. And please, don't mention your birthday to Christopher. It might set him off. I turned around and picked up my backpack. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The betrayal I felt wasn't a hot fire. It was absolute zero. It froze my heart instantly. The pizza won't be necessary, I said, heading for the stairs. Where are you going? Valentina called out. To my room, I replied, to be an adult. The betrayal was worse than the neglect I was used to. But this active erasure of my existence to soothe the ego of a grown man, this was a declaration of war. My room was the only sanctuary I had ever known in that house. It was small, the smallest bedroom, tucked away at the end of the hall, but I had made it mine. The walls were covered in sketches, designs for jewelry, intricate patterns of silver and gold that I had been drawing since I was 12. I didn't sit on my bed to cry. I didn't throw myself onto the pillows and sob into the duvet. I didn't have time for that. I pulled my large suitcase from the top of the closet. It was dusty. We rarely went on vacations because Christopher didn't like traveling. He said planes gave him anxiety and long car rides made him carsick. So we stayed home. Always. I opened the suitcase on the bed and began to pack. I moved with mechanical efficiency. Clothes first. Jeans, sweaters, t-shirts. I didn't take everything, just the things I actually wore, the things I had bought with money earned from babysitting and tutoring. Next came my sketchbook. That was non-negotiable. Then my small toolkit, pliers, wire cutters, a small hammer. These were my real lifeline. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from a potent cocktail of adrenaline and rage. I could hear the muffled sounds of the TV downstairs. They had turned it on. I heard the familiar theme song of a sitcom Christopher had watched 1,000 times. They were down there, waiting for the pizza, likely relieved that the Gabriella problem had been handled so smoothly. I grabbed my laptop and my charger. I looked around the room one last time. I saw the photo of us from 5 years ago on my dresser. We looked like a normal family. I picked it up, looked at Christopher's smug grin, and placed it face down on the wood. Then I took out my phone. I had one call to make. Hello, the voice on the other end was sharp, professional, but softened instantly when she saw the caller ID. Gabriella? Happy birthday, sweetheart. I was just about to call you. Are you having a nice dinner? Aunt Margaret, I said, keeping my voice steady. Can you come pick me up? There was a pause. Aunt Margaret was my father's sister, but she was nothing like him. She was a firecracker, a woman who had built her own real estate firm from the ground up. She had always been the black sheep because she refused to coddle Roman, and she certainly refused to worship Christopher. Where are you? She asked, her tone shifting from celebratory to alert. I'm at home, I'm packing. I'm leaving Aunt Margaret tonight. Did he hit you? Her voice dropped an octave. No, nothing like that. They canceled my birthday because Christopher was sad. They're downstairs watching TV and eating pizza, and they told me not to mention that it's my birthday so I don't upset him. A string of curses that would have made a sailor blush came through the receiver. I'm 10 minutes away. Be on the curb. Thank you. Don't thank me, kid. Just be ready. I hung up, I zipped the suitcase. It was heavy, but I didn't care. I hauled it off the bed and dragged it to the door. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the smell of pepperoni pizza filled the hallway. It made me nauseous. I walked past the living room archway. Roman saw me first. He was mid-bite, a slice of pizza folded in his hand. He froze. Valentina turned, her eyes widening as she saw the suitcase. And there, lounging on the recliner like a king on his throne, was Christopher. He was wearing his pajamas at 5:30 p.m. and didn't even look away from the TV. "Gabriella," Valentina stood up, wiping her hands on a napkin. "What are you doing? Are you doing laundry?" "I'm moving out," I said. My voice rang clear and true in the living room. Christopher finally looked over. He blinked, his expression blank and disinterested. "Can you guys keep it down? This is the good part." "Hush, Christopher," Roman said, standing up. "Gabriella. Stop being dramatic. Put the bag away. You're not going anywhere." "I'm 18, I said, tightening my grip on the handle. "As you so helpfully reminded me an hour ago, I am an adult. And as an adult, I am choosing not to live in a house where my existence is an inconvenience." "You're overreacting," Valentina said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "We said we'd celebrate next month. Why do you have to be so selfish? Look at your brother. He's having a crisis and you're making this all about you." "It is about me," I snapped. "It's my birthday, but you know what? It's fine. You guys enjoy the pizza, enjoy the sitcom, enjoy coddling him until he's 40 and still sleeping in that recliner." "If you walk out that door," Roman warned, pointing a finger at me, "don't expect a penny from us. No college tuition, no car insurance. Nothing. You think it's easy out there. You'll be crawling back in a week begging for a hot meal." I looked at Christopher. He was smirking now. He was enjoying this. He loved seeing me in trouble. He loved knowing that even on my day, he was the center of attention. "I won't be back," I said. "You have nothing," Roman shouted. "You have no job, no degree, and no money." I opened the front door. The cool evening air hit my face, smelling of freedom and rain. I looked back at them one last time. "I have more than you think," I said. They thought they held all the cards because they controlled the bank accounts. They thought they owned me because they paid for the roof over my head. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that for the last 3 years, while Christopher was finding himself and they were busy managing his moods, I had been building something in the shadows. They saw a daughter. They didn't see the business partner I had already become. To understand why I walked out that door with such conviction, you have to understand the dynamic of my house. For as long as I can remember, the world revolved around Christopher. He was the firstborn, the son, the carrier of the family name. When he was 5, he drew a stick figure, and my parents framed it in the hallway, calling him a prodigy. When I was 7 and won the school's spelling bee, they forgot to pick me up from the ceremony because Christopher had a stomach ache. It wasn't just favoritism, it was idolatry. Christopher was now 22. He had dropped out of 3 different colleges. The first one was too academic, the second was too stifling for his creativity, and the third, a culinary school, he quit because the chef yelled at him. "I don't respond well to aggression," he had told my parents, and they nodded sympathetically, blaming the instructor for crushing his spirit. Since then, he hadn't worked a day. Not one. He spent his days sleeping until noon, playing video games, and occasionally scrolling through social media to announce his next big project. 1 month he was going to be a Twitch streamer. My parents bought him a $3,000 setup, camera, microphone, lighting ring, the works. He streamed twice, got 0 views, and quit because the algorithm is rigged against new creators. Then he decided he was a stock market guru. Roman gave him $5,000 to invest. It was gone in a week. Christopher claimed the market was manipulated by hedge funds and it wasn't his fault. Roman apologized to him for the stress of losing the money. I, on the other hand, was the invisible utility player. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week starting when I was 14 because Valentina was too exhausted from dealing with Christopher's emotional needs. I did my own laundry. I maintained a 4 GPA not because they pressured me, but because I knew grades were my ticket out. But the real conflict, the thing that rotted the foundation of our family, was Christopher's malice. It wasn't enough that he was lazy, he needed me to be less. If I came home with an A on a test, Christopher would loudly wonder why school standards were dropping so low. If I wore a new dress I bought with my own money, he would ask if I had gained weight, prompting Valentina to suggest I go on a diet just to be healthy. He was a master of the subtle dig, the passive-aggressive comment designed to chip away at my self-esteem. He was a vampire, feeding on the attention of my parents and the misery he could inflict on me. Standing on the curb that night, watching Aunt Margot's sleek black SUV pull up, I replayed the last conversation I'd had with Christopher alone. It was 2 days before my birthday. I was in the kitchen, sketching a design for a custom pendant, a commissioned piece from a client I had met online. I had been selling my jewelry on Etsy and Instagram for 2 years under a pseudonym. I was making decent money, enough to stash away in a savings account my parents didn't know about. Christopher had walked in, scratching his stomach, looking for a soda. He saw the sketch. "Still drawing those L. It'll doodles," he sneered, grabbing a Coke from the fridge. "It's a design," I said, covering the paper. "It's cute," he said, popping the tab. "Maybe one day you can sell them at a flea market or something, make a few bucks for candy." He leaned in, his breath smelling of stale chips. "You know, Dad was talking about my business idea yesterday. He thinks I have real executive potential. He's thinking of liquidating some of his retirement fund to help me launch my brand." "What brand?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "You don't do anything." His eyes narrowed. They were cold, empty eyes. "I have vision, Gabriella. That's something you'll never understand with your little drawings. You're a worker bee, I'm a king, and kings require capital." He took a long swig of the soda, staring me down. "Just remember, everything you have, this house, the food, the clothes, it's because Mom and Dad are generous. But don't think for a second you're equal to me. You're just here." That was Christopher. He didn't just want to succeed, he wanted to ensure I knew my place was beneath him. He was polished on the outside when he needed to be, charming to extended family, smiling in Christmas cards, but inside, he was a hollow shell filled with envy and entitlement. As I threw my suitcase into the back of Aunt Margot's car, I looked back at the house. The blue light of the television flickered in the living room window. They were in there, safe in their delusion. "You okay, kid?" Aunt Margot asked, putting the car in gear. "No," I said, buckling my seatbelt, "but I will be." "Where to?" "Anywhere but here," I said, "and Aunt Margot." "Yeah. I need to file for an LLC." Margot glanced at me, a slow, predatory grin spreading across her face. She didn't ask why. She didn't tell me to go back and apologize. "Relentless," she said approvingly. "That's my girl. Let's go get some real food. I know a steakhouse that doesn't care if you're under 21. As we drove away, I didn't look back. I left the golden child and his enablers to their pizza. They thought they had punished me. They thought they had put me in my place. But all they had done was cut the anchor that was holding me down. The first morning at Aunt Margot's house was disorienting. I woke up expecting to see the peeling beige wallpaper of my small room and hear the heavy footsteps of my father pacing the hallway, worrying about bills. Instead, I opened my eyes to sunlight streaming through sheer white curtains and the smell of fresh coffee, real coffee, not the instant sludge my parents drank to save money. I sat up, panic flaring in my chest for a split second. I actually left. Then the relief washed over me. It was a physical sensation, like a heavy coat sliding off my shoulders. I was free. I went downstairs to find Aunt Margot in her sunroom, surrounded by blueprints and legal pads. She looked up over her reading glasses, a sharp, assessing look in her eyes. "You sleep well?" she asked. "Better than I have in 18 years, I admitted, pouring myself a cup from the pot on the sideboard. Good, because we have work to do. She tapped the chair opposite her. Last night you mentioned an LLC, you mentioned you have more than they think. I'm not running a charity here, Gabriella. If you're going to stay, I need to know what your plan is. I love you, but I won't enable you. That's your parents' job. I sat down and opened my laptop. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the first time I was showing anyone the truth. I logged into my bank account, then my sales dashboard, and turned the screen toward her. I don't need charity, I said softly. Margaret leaned in. She squinted at the screen. Then she pulled her glasses down her nose and looked closer. Her eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. Is this correct? She asked, pointing at the revenue column. Yes, I said. I started Belladon Jewelry 2 years ago. I create custom architectural pieces using recycled silver and semi-precious stones. It started slow, just a few sales on Etsy. But 6 months ago, a mid-tier fashion influencer found my page. She wore one of my chokers to a gallery opening. Since then, I've been on a 6-week waitlist. Margaret looked at the number again. It was over $40,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. It wasn't millions, but for an 18-year-old who had supposedly nothing, it was a fortune. My parents don't know, I added quickly. If they knew, they would have made me give it to Christopher for his ventures. I used a PO box for supplies. I did the work at night while they slept. Margaret leaned back, a slow, proud smile spreading across her face. You're a shark, Gabriella, a quiet, deadly little shark. I need to protect it, I said, my voice hardening. I'm 18 now. Legally, it's mine, but I know them. Roman, Dad, he thinks he owns me. If he finds out, he'll try to claim I used household residue. R says, or something ridiculous, I need a lawyer. I know just the guy, Margaret said, reaching for her phone. We're going to lock this down so tight, not even a neutrino could get through. 2 days later, I was sitting in a glass-walled office in downtown, shaking hands with Mr. Henderson, a corporate attorney who looked like he ate nails for breakfast. We filed the paperwork for the LLC. We trademarked the name. But then, Henderson asked a question that shifted the ground beneath me. Gabriella, given the volatile nature of your departure and your brother's history of financial instability, we should run a full credit check on you, just to ensure your parents haven't used your identity for anything. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. They wouldn't do that. They ignore me. They don't think about me enough to use my name. Let's just check, Henderson said. When the report came back 10 minutes later, Henderson's face remained impassive, but he sighed. It appears there is a credit card opened in your name 6 months ago, he said, sliding a paper across the desk. It's nearly maxed out, $3,000, mostly electronic stores and online gaming credits. I stared at the paper. Christopher. He must have taken my social security card from the filing cabinet, I whispered. The betrayal was a physical blow. It wasn't just that they ignored me, it was that they, or at least Christopher, saw me as a resource to be harvested. We will dispute this immediately as fraud, Henderson said, his pen hovering over a notepad. But this means war, Gabriella. If we file a fraud report, the police get involved. It will trace back to the IP address at your parents' house. I thought about the canceled birthday. I thought of the pizza. I thought of Christopher smirking as I dragged my suitcase out the door. File it, I said, and I want to know everything else. If he's doing this to me, what is he doing to them? I have a private investigator I use for due diligence, Henderson said. If you want to know the financial health of the household you just left, to protect yourself from future liability, we can look. Do it, I said. I want to know exactly what I'm up against. 3 months passed. I was living in Aunt Margaret's guest cottage, which I had converted into a full studio. My business was exploding. I had hired a virtual assistant to handle emails and was currently negotiating a contract with a boutique retailer in the city. I bought a car, a reliable, newer model sedan, fully paid for in cash. I dressed differently now. Gone were the oversized hoodies I used to hide in. I wore tailored blazers and sharp trousers. I felt like a different person. But the past has a way of knocking on the door. It started with a text from Valentina. "We need to talk. Family meeting. Olive Garden, noon tomorrow, don't be late." "No, how are you? No, we miss you. Just a summons." I showed it to Margaret. "You don't have to go," she said, sipping her tea. "I do," I replied, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. I applied a layer of red lipstick war paint. Henderson's investigator sent over the preliminary report on their finances yesterday. "It's bad, Margaret. If I don't set boundaries now, they're going to show up on your doorstep with suitcases when the bank takes the house." "I'd turn the hose on them," Margaret muttered. "But fine, go, take my car if you want to look even more intimidating." "No," I said, "my car is fine, it's mine." I arrived at the restaurant at 12:05 p.m. I made them wait 5 minutes. When I walked to the table, the visual contrast was jarring. My parents looked 10 years older. Roman's shoulders were slumped, his skin gray. Valentina looked frantic, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected a debt collector to jump out from behind a breadstick basket. And then there was Christopher. He was wearing a designer watch, fake, I could tell from here, and a shirt that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He was scrolling on his phone, looking bored. "You're late," Roman grunted as I sat down. "I'm busy," I replied smoothly, placing my clutch on the table. "Hello, Mother, Christopher." "Nice blazer," Christopher scoffed without looking up. "Thrift store find." "It's Italian wool," I said calmly. "What do you want?" Valentina leaned in, her voice trembling. "Gabriella, we're in a bit of a tight spot. Temporary, of course, but with Christopher's new venture launching soon, our liquidity is tied up." "What venture?" I asked, looking directly at my brother. "Cryptocurrency arbitrage," Christopher said, using buzzwords he clearly didn't understand. "I'm on the verge of a massive return, but you have to spend money to make money, right?" "So," Roman interrupted, clearing his throat, "we know you're staying with Margaret. We assume you're working some little job. We need you to contribute. We calculated that for the 18 years we raised you, you owe us approximately." "Stop," I said. I didn't raise my voice, but the sharpness of it made Roman click his mouth shut. "I am not giving you money," I said, "and I am certainly not giving him money." "It's not for him," Valentina cried. "It's for the family. The mortgages, we're a month behind." "A month?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I know about the second mortgage, Dad. I know about the home equity line of credit you maxed out last year. I know that you liquidated your 401k 3 months ago." The color drained from Roman's face. How do you know that?" "Because I hired a lawyer to fix the credit fraud Christopher committed against me," I said, locking eyes with my brother. Christopher flinched. I was just borrowing." "It's identity theft, Christopher," I said pleasantly. "We disputed the charges. The credit card company has likely already flagged your IP address. You might want to be careful answering the phone." "You little snitch." Christopher slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. "You're trying to ruin me. Mom, tell her. She's jealous because I'm about to be a millionaire." "Gabriella, how could you?" Valentina whispered, looking at me with horror. "He's your brother. He needed that equipment for his work." "His work?" I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse. It was a printout from the investigator. "This is a record of his investments. Online poker, sports betting, and a subscription to a website that, well, let's just say it's not for children. That's where the money went. That's where your retirement went." I slid the paper across the table to Roman. He looked at it. His hands shook. He saw the dates, the amounts, the websites. Christopher stood up, his face purple with rage. "That's fake. She forged it. She's always been a liar. She's trying to tear this family apart because she's miserable and alone." "Sit down, Christopher," Roman whispered, but he didn't look up from the paper. "No, I won't sit down," Christopher yelled, drawing stares from other tables. "She's a loser. She's working some minimum wage job and thinks she's better than us. I am the future of this family." I stood up, I smoothed my blazer. Actually, Christopher, I own my own company. I made more last month than you've made in your entire life. I'm not the one tearing this family apart. I'm just the only one who stopped digging the hole. I looked at my parents. I'm not giving you a dime. If you lose the house, it's on you. You chose him, you keep choosing him. Enjoy the consequences. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Christopher screaming, she's lying, and the pathetic sound of my mother trying to hush him. I thought the lunch would be the end of it, but it only accelerated the spiral. Over the next 6 months, the gap between my reality and theirs widened into a canyon. My jewelry brand, Gilded Lily, was featured in a major lifestyle magazine. They did a 2-page spread on the young artisan redefining luxury. There was a photo of me in my studio, welding a silver cuff, looking fierce and focused. I didn't send it to my parents. I didn't have to. Aunt Margaret told me that a neighbor had shown it to Valentina at the grocery store. Apparently, the reaction wasn't pride. It was hysteria. Christopher began a campaign of digital harassment. He created anonymous accounts to leave 1-star reviews on my store, claiming the metal turned his skin green or that I never shipped the items. We can sue him for libel, Henderson suggested during one of our monthly strategy meetings. Not yet, I said, watching the sales tick up despite the reviews. My loyal customers were drowning out the trolls. Let him exhaust himself. He's getting sloppy. And he was. The investigator, Mr. Vance, was uncovering a trail of destruction that was truly breathtaking. He's moved on from your parents, Vance told me over the phone one rainy Tuesday. They're tapped out. Roman is working double shifts at the warehouse just to pay the interest on the loans. So, Christopher found a new target. Who? I asked, dread curling in my stomach. His fiancée, Vance said. He has a fiancée. A girl named Sarah. Sweet kid, works as a nurse. He met her online. He's convinced her to take out a personal loan for their dream wedding and a startup investment for him. He's draining her dry, Gabriella, just like he did to your parents. I felt sick. It was one thing for my parents to ruin themselves. They were adults who made their choice. But dragging an innocent third party into his black hole. Get me proof, I said. I want bank transfers. I want text messages. I want everything. I'm already on it, but there's a deadline. What deadline? Aunt Margaret's 50th wedding anniversary party. It's in 2 weeks. I had almost forgot. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Ben were throwing a massive celebration. It was a mandatory family event. Extended cousins, business partners, old FR. Eanes, everyone would be there. And because Margaret was the matriarch figure now, my parents would be there. They wouldn't dare miss the chance to rub elbows with Margaret's wealthy friends, hoping for a bailout. Christopher is planning something for that party, Vance warned. He's been bragging on his Discord channels about a big reveal that's going to put his arrogant sister in her place. He claims he's going to expose you as a fraud in front of everyone. Let him try, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. The week before the party, the evidence arrived. A thick manila envelope landed on my desk. I opened it and flipped through the pages. It was a masterclass in deception. Fake invoices he had created to show my parents business expenses. Withdrawal slips where he had forged Roman's signature. And the worst part, a screenshot of a text thread with Sarah, the fiancée. Sarah, Chris, I can't take out another loan. The bank said no. Christopher, if you loved me, you'd find a way. My sister stole my business idea, Sarah. I need this money to sue her and get what's mine. Once I win, we'll be rich. Don't you trust me? He was using me as the villain to scam her. He was telling people I stole his designs, his company. That's why he was so confident. He believed his own lie so thoroughly that he thought he could convince the world. I closed the folder. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but with the cold, hard certainty of what had to be done. I called Margaret. Is the guest list finalized? I asked. Yes, she said. Your parents and the golden boy are confirmed. He even asked if he could make a toast. Let him, I said, let him speak first. Gabriella, Margot's voice was cautious. What are you going to do? I'm going to give him exactly what he wants, I said, staring at the magazine framed on my wall. He wants the spotlight. I'm going to make sure he shines brighter than he ever has before. I looked at the folder. This wasn't just a defense anymore, it was an execution. The venue for Aunt Margot's 50th wedding anniversary was a restored botanical garden estate on the edge of the city. It was a place of glass walls, hanging wisteria, and soft, golden lighting. A stark contrast to the dark, suffocating house I had fled a year ago. I arrived in my own car, a sleek charcoal sedan that I had paid for in full. I wore a dress I had designed myself, a deep emerald silk gown with a structural silver collar that mimicked the organic curves of a lily. It was a walking advertisement for gilded lily, and it was armor. As I walked into the main hall, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and expensive perfume. I spotted Aunt Margot immediately, holding court near the champagne tower. She caught my eye and gave a subtle, steel-spined nod. She knew what was in the clutch purse tucked under my arm. Then I saw them. My parents were huddled near the buffet, looking like ghosts haunting a feast they weren't invited to. Roman's suit was ill-fitting, hanging loosely on a frame that had lost significant weight. Valentina wore a dress that was 10 years out of style, her face pinched with anxiety. They were trying to project an air of dignity, but they radiated desperation. And there was Christopher. He was standing by the bar, talking loudly to a group of Aunt Margot's business associates. He wore a white tuxedo jacket that was a size too tight, likely rented. He was gesturing wildly, his face flushed. I could see the guests politely trying to back away, but he kept closing the distance, trapping them in his orbit. I took a breath and walked toward the family table. Gabriella, Valentina hissed as I approached. She didn't hug me, she didn't say hello. She just scanned my dress with greedy, resentful eyes. You look expensive. I'm doing well, I said simply. Hello, Dad. Roman grunted, refusing to look at me. You have a lot of nerve showing up here after ignoring our calls. We're family, Gabriella. Family helps each other. Family doesn't steal identities, I replied, my voice low so as not to cause a scene. Yet. Oh, drop it, Christopher said, sliding into the seat next to me. He smelled of alcohol and nervous sweat. You and your little lawyer, you think you're so smart. You're going to be hearing from my lawyer soon. Is that so? I asked, unfolding my napkin. Does your lawyer accept payment in Monopoly money? Because that's all you have left, Christopher. He sneered, leaning close. You'll see, tonight changes everything. I'm going to put things right. I looked past him, scanning the room until my eyes landed on a young woman sitting alone at a small table near the back. She looked terrified, clutching her purse with white knuckles. It was Sarah. I had sent her an invitation via social media 3 days ago, telling her that if she wanted the truth about her fiancé's finances, she should come. Christopher didn't know she was there. The dinner commenced, speech. Were made. Uncle Ben gave a tearful tribute to Margot. The atmosphere was warm, celebratory. Then Christopher stood up. He wasn't on the schedule. He tapped his glass with a fork, the sharp ding-ding-ding cutting through the laughter. Excuse me, everyone, he shouted. The room went quiet. Aunt Margot stiffened, her eyes locking onto mine. I'd like to say a few words, Christopher announced, swaying slightly. For my Aunt Margot, but also to clear the air about something. He walked to the center of the room, grabbing the microphone from the stand. You all know me, he began, flashing a charming, lopsided smile that didn't reach his dead eyes. I'm Christopher, the creative visionary of the family, and sitting right there, he pointed a shaking finger at me, is my little sister, Gabriella. Every head turned toward me. I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. She looks successful, doesn't she? Christopher laughed bitterly. Fancy dress, new car. Everyone thinks she's some kind of jewelry genius, but I think it's time the family knew the truth. It's time you all knew that Gilded Lily is a fraud. A murmur rippled through the room. Roman and Valentina looked up, their eyes widening with a mix of horror and hope. Hope that perhaps he was right, that they could reclaim the power. "She stole my designs," Christopher shouted, his voice cracking. "Years ago, I drew those sketches. I came up with the concept of organic architectural jewelry. She used to go through my trash, steal my notebooks, and now she's selling my genius and cutting me out of the profits." "That's not true," Aunt Margaret said, standing up. "Christopher, sit down." "No," Christopher yelled, pacing the floor. "I'm the victim here. She abandoned our parents. She left them to rot while she got rich off my intellectual property. She's a thief, a liar, and I demand that she admits it right now." He turned to me, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "Admit it, Gabriella. Tell them you're a nothing without me." The silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of silence that precedes an execution. I stood up slowly. I picked up my clutch. I walked to the center of the room, stopping 3 feet from him. He loomed over me, expecting me to cry, to run, to crumble like the little sister I used to be. "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice was calm, amplified by the acoustics of the glass room. "I'm finished when you admit you owe me everything," he spat. I opened my clutch and pulled out the thick manila envelope. I turned to the audience. "My brother claims I stole his designs," I said, projecting my voice clearly. "But the United States Patent and Trademark Office might disagree. I filed for my first copyright 3 years ago. Christopher, can you tell everyone what you were doing 3 years ago?" I was developing the brand," he stammered. "No," I said, pulling out a sheet of paper. 3 years ago, according to your own social media history, which you forgot to scrub, you were trying to become a professional Call of Duty player. You streamed for 6 months. There is not a single sketch, not a single file, not a single piece of evidence that you have ever designed a piece of jewelry in your life." "I kept them secret," he screamed. "Secrets don't leave paper trails," I said, "but fraud does." I turned toward the back of the room. "Sarah, could you come here, please?" Christopher froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He turned slowly to see his fiancée walking through the crowd. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, but she held her head high. "Sarah," Christopher whispered, "what are you doing here?" Sarah stopped next to me. She didn't look at him. She looked at the guests. "Christopher told me that Gabriella stole his money," Sarah said, her voice shaking but audible. "He told me he needed $20,000 to sue her. He made me take out a loan against my car. He said it was for legal fees." "It was," Christopher pleaded, reaching for her. "Baby, listen." "Don't touch me," she snapped, recoiling. I handed Sarah the bank statements from the investigator's file. She held them up. "These are the transfer records," I said to the room. "The money Sarah gave him didn't go to a lawyer. It went to an offshore gambling site. And the business loan my parents took out against their house, that went to pay off his debts to a bookie in Vegas." I turned to my parents. Roman was clutching his chest. Valentina had her hand over her mouth. "He didn't invest your retirement, Dad," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "He gambled it. He lost it all. And then he tried to steal my identity to keep the game going. I didn't ruin this family. He did, and you let him." Christopher looked around the room. He saw the disgust on the faces of the guests. He saw the cold fury in Aunt Margaret's eyes. He saw the end of his world. "You bay." "Asterisk," he screamed, lunging at me. But he never reached me. 2 of the venue's security guards, who Aunt Margaret had wisely placed on standby, stepped out of the shadows. They grabbed him by the arms before he could take a second step. "Get off me," he thrashed, kicking and screaming like a toddler. "She's lying. It's a conspiracy. Mom, Dad, help me." Roman and Valentina didn't move. They sat frozen, staring at the son they had worshipped, seeing him for the first time as the monster they had created. "Get him out of here," Aunt Margaret ordered, her voice like ice. As they dragged him away, kicking and screaming obscenities, the room remained silent. I looked at Sarah. I put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. It's over now, I said. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. The fallout was swift, brutal, and absolute. Aunt Margaret didn't just kick Christopher out of the party, she pressed charges for the disturbance. That arrest opened the floodgates. When the police looked into his background, combined with the fraud report Henderson and I had filed, the dominoes began to fall. Christopher was charged with multiple counts of identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Because the amount he had stolen from Sarah and my parents exceeded a certain threshold, it wasn't a slap on the wrist. He was looking at real time. My parents' reaction to his arrest was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. 2 days after the party, I was in my studio, working on a new commission, a phoenix rising from ashes, fittingly, when my phone rang. It was Roman. I debated not answering, but I needed closure. "Hello," I said. "How could you?" His voice was raspy, broken. "He's in jail, Gabriella. Your brother is in a cell." "He committed crimes, Dad. He stole from you. He stole from me. He stole from Sarah." "He has a disease," Roman shouted, the old anger flaring up. "He needed help. He didn't need his sister destroying him in front of the whole city. Do you know how humiliated we are? We can't show our faces at the club. The bank is calling every hour about the house." "You're worried about the club?" I asked, incredulous. "You lost your home because of him, and you're blaming me for exposing it." "We could have fixed it," he insisted. "If you had just given us the money, we could have paid the debts, gotten him therapy, we could have been a family." I closed my eyes. There it was. The delusion ran so deep it was terminal. They would never see me as a daughter. They would only ever see me as a resource that failed to serve its purpose. "I'm blocking this number, Dad," I said. "Gabriella, wait, we have nowhere to go, if the bank takes the house." "You're adults," I said, echoing the words they had said to me on my 18th birthday. "You'll figure it out." I hung up. Then I blocked the number. I blocked Valentina's number. I blocked the house line. 6 months later, I walked out of the courthouse with Sarah. She had testified against Christopher. He had taken a plea deal, 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation and mandatory restitution. It was a light sentence, perhaps, but for a boy who had never been told no in his life, 3 years in a concrete box would be an eternity. My parents had lost the house. The last I heard from Aunt Margaret, they were living in a small, one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Roman was working as a greeter at a hardware store. Valentina was cleaning houses. They were miserable, they were bitter, and they were alone. They had reached out to Aunt Margaret for money, but she had given them a simple choice. Acknowledge what you did to Gabriella, apologize to her, and I might help. They refused. They still maintained that I was the villain who destroyed their promising son. I stood on the courthouse steps, the autumn sun warming my face. Sarah turned to me. She looked healthier, happier. She had started nursing school again. "Thank you," she said, "for saving me." "We saved each other," I smiled. I walked to my car. Aunt Margaret was waiting in the passenger seat. She had a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 plastic flutes. "To justice?" she asked, popping the cork. "To freedom," I corrected her. I drove us back to the studio. Gilded Lily was expanding. I had just signed a lease on a storefront in the Arts District. I was hiring my first full-time staff. My life was full, vibrant, and entirely my own. I thought about the girl who had walked out of that house with a suitcase and a broken heart. I wished I could go back and tell her that it wouldn't just be okay, it would be magnificent. I had lost a brother and parents who never truly loved me, but I had found a family in Aunt Margaret, in Sarah, in the community I had built. I had found my voice. And most importantly, on that dark night when they tried to erase my existence, I had found myself.